Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our off-season, the Hurricane Hub discussion for Saturday, March 18th, 2023. Happy late St. Patrick's Day. It's a day late, but it's only a day after, so I guess it's still valid to say Happy St. Patrick's Day to all. But whatever, let's move on with what we have for today. Starting off, of course, as always, with our countdown till June 1st. We're at 75 days now. Last week we were in the 80s, and as I told you, it would be at 75 days this week. If you want to subtract from now, 75 from now till next week, we'll already be at 68 days. So next week we'll already be under the 70 day time frame. And what can I say? We're getting closer towards the season. And it's really these next few weeks, as I've been saying for the last few weeks. Really, these next few weeks, as we're starting to get into, we're in mid-March. We're past mid-March now, and we're almost into April. Things are really going to start getting interesting and very important as it pertains to hurricane season, because now is when it all starts coming together. Now is when we have the spring predictability barrier, which ends, and now after March and moving into April and May, that's when we start seeing things stabilize a little bit more, since right now we're still kind of switching the seasons. We're kind of going back and forth between winter and spring, and we'll show you that later on, especially with what's going on with the United States right now. Still very indicative of how things are in a battlefield almost right now. But bottom line, the next 2 weeks are going to get very interesting, and you want to keep attuned to what happens, because things could change a lot in these next few weeks. But taking a look at what's happening right now across the Atlantic, satellite-wise, nothing much going on. You see the dry air, especially in the low level, with these low-level kind of ripple effect clouds, as I like to say. Really indicative of dry air. Then you see all this clouds moving very strongly, especially in the upper atmosphere out of the west, moving east. That is indicative of really strong upper level shear, and that's why we really don't have development this time of year, especially with the dry air, and of course on top of that, cooler SSTs as well. But especially why we don't have development this time of year, just look at how strong these upper level winds are. And when we have a developing storm, they need to be vertically stacked. Thunderstorms need to be vertically stacked in order for a hurricane to develop healthily, in a healthy way, I guess is the best way to say it. And when you have wind shear that blows over the top of these storms, they can't develop, and they can't grow in an upward motion, which is how they do grow and how they're able to thrive. So that's why we don't have hurricane development this time of year. But of course, it's March, and as we get towards April and May, the wind shear will start calming down, and then that's when we get closer towards the season and things start becoming more favorable for development. Looking at the SST anomalies right now for, of course, yesterday, March 17th, NOAA Coral Reef Watch always updates the day behind, but they do update every day. Taking a look at the Pacific, continues to warm, especially right here off the Central American coast. That is really warm. But we did expect this, of course. Westerly winds across the Pacific in the last few weeks really helped warm things up. And we are starting to change the atmosphere. As we all thought, La Nina's gone. We don't have any more trace of these cooler anomaly pockets, really non-existent anymore, compared to the beginning of the year when we had a huge cool anomaly pocket across the entire equatorial Pacific. That was our La Nina. Now it's non-existent anymore, and especially if you look towards the Central Pacific, roughly where the Nino 3.4 is, there really is no cool anomalies there, or any big patch of cool anomalies that are left over. Still in the Northern Pacific, but that is a kind of a separate situation associated with the PDO. These events do go hand in hand. With La Nina, sometimes we will get a colder Northern Pacific in general. That's just how the ocean currents work. But I am sure that once we do get El Nino to develop, of course, if it does happen, I'm pretty sure the ocean currents will respond in the same way, and we'll probably see much more warm SST anomalies off the coast of the Pacific, but it all depends on what happens. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, though, the Gulf of Mexico still very warm, and I just gotta mention that everybody's saying that we're looking very certain that, oh, El Nino's gonna come and we're gonna see the Atlantic shut down. This is really something that we have to pay attention to, especially when it comes to the talks of El Nino coming down and completely shutting off the Atlantic. Because look how warm it is, and I said this before. It's not like February or January where we see the Atlantic warm, but it cools off by the time we get to spring. Now we're basically in spring, and the Atlantic is still very warm, and it's been warming up significantly in the last few weeks. And of course, we're getting closer towards the season, so this will be a really interesting factor that comes into play. And if we do get any storm, that really you need to keep in your mind that even if we don't have as many storms as we normally would in an active year, the anomalies are still warm in the eastern Atlantic as well as the western Atlantic as well, especially off the coast of the United States and in the western Atlantic in general. Like it's been the entire year, basically, in the entire winter, nothing has really cooled off significantly at all. This is all really important things that you really need to keep in mind, because not always will El Nino come in and shut down the Atlantic completely. We could always still have that one storm that comes in and makes the season significant in a way that we had this one really big storm. So that's something that we need to keep in mind and something you should not forget. But still, with the Nino 3.4 index, we're at neutral right now. Definitely away from the La Nina that we had basically ended a month ago at this point, since the last time when we crossed the line from 0 0.5 degrees Celsius, which is the threshold that we look at for La Nina. And we've been warmer ever since, and we're slowly, of course, gradually moving in the direction of a warmer, and so closer towards El Nino now than before. But really interesting to note, Ben Knoll tweeted just this past week, and actually just yesterday he tweeted this, not yesterday, 2 days ago, looking at the date, taking a break from this winter to look at something that might affect next winter, and that is El Nino, of course, what everybody's talking about. But it's very interesting that he mentions this too, and that's what he highlights in his little tweet. The Nino 1 and 2 regions, of course, we have the Nino 1 and 2, we have the Nino 3, and the Nino 3.4, which is the one that we talk about the most, since that's what is most important, especially when it comes to these ENSO predictions and these ENSO outlooks. I always talk about how the Nino 3.4 is the most important part, but there are other parts to the ENSO too, and he's talking about the Nino 1 and 2, which is at its highest since March of 2017. And in March of 2017, that's when we had a really warm 1 and 2, and kind of had this coastal El Nino type of situation that brought a lot of heavy rain and flooding to the coast of South America, and that was a whole other situation. But this year we're the warmest since then, and kind of interesting how we're the warmest since 2017. Maybe some sort of superstition there. I don't know, but looking at what Ben Knoll is saying, yeah, the area of the Nino 1 and 2 really has warmed up in the last few weeks. We're now at 1.1 degrees Celsius above normal, very warm, and it is very reflective when we look at the chart over here. That area off the coast of South America, very warm indeed, and very interesting to look at, especially when it comes to the development of this El Nino. And I guess you could look at it through the SOI as well. If we look at the last 30 days, we've really tanked. If you remember, when we talked last week, we were at 6 points above normal with the 30-day average for the SOI. Now, look at where we are. We're at 0 points above normal. We're basically neutral with the SOI now. The 90-day average is still up there, 11 points. That's going to take a little bit of time to come down, though. And if we look at the daily contribution for today, at negative 4 points. So we've actually had a pattern as of recently that is, kind of tipped in favor of the change in the atmosphere, like everybody was saying. And I'm gonna really quickly turn this on. This is the kind of a bar line showing a bar, kind of map showing of the daily contributions to the SOI of over the last 30 days since mid-February. And look at this. This is very interesting. Notice how these bars over the last few days and over the last week or so, notice how all of the bars here have been consistently negative. And you can also look at this table too. Since March 11th, we've had values, daily contribution values in the negatives. So no wonder why we've seen the SOI in the last few days and over the last few weeks really tank below. And it's really reflective of everything that's changing. And all I gotta say is watch this and see how it progresses, because the more it changes, the more we'll have a more certain idea of what goes on across the Pacific and with ENSO. But of course, it is not the only thing that we look for. If we go back to the map, we have the Nino 3.4. Then we also have the MDR2, and that's the next thing I want to talk about. The MDR, as I said, over the last 2 weeks, really has warmed up. We've gone from a slightly below normal MDR, kind of down there. But of course, that's what we usually have during the winter. Especially in the last few years, we would have this very warm MDR kind of early on in the winter. Then it kind of cools down closer towards March. But really, in the last few weeks, it's really begun to warm up at a value now of 0.1 degrees Celsius above normal. Very reflective of how warm this area is right now. And it's really interesting though, because it just depends on how warm does it stay. Does it stay warm right now? Does it get warmer? It's all a very important thing that we need to watch over the next few weeks. And I tell you, especially when it comes to this El Nino La Nina situation, really interesting to see how the MDR plays out, because that'll have a significant factor not only to how it affects ENSO, but also how it affects us here in the Atlantic, because of storms that could be developing. And even though we might not have a lot of it, we could always have those storms that are dealing with warmer than normal SSTs in the Atlantic that could have more favorable conditions to become strong, despite the fact that we might not have something like 2005 or 2017. Well, we probably won't have that anyway. But just saying, like a generally above normal year, that does not mean, if we don't have it, that does not mean that we're ridded of warmer of more hurricanes and impacts. There's always going to be that, and this is very interesting to watch as we go towards the next few months. But looking at what's going on right now, though, once again, we always talk about what's going on in the future, but then we also have to talk about what's going on right now. Always very important to keep those two both in mind, because you don't always want to be stuck on the future and what's going to happen on the future when we really don't know what's going to happen. We can only look at what's going on right now, and that's what we're going to do right now with the Gulf of Mexico SST temperatures and taking a look at what's happening there. It's been very warm, especially over the last few weeks. Look at that, 26 degrees Celsius line stretching all the way from the Central Gulf, which kind of insane for March. That's something that I really need to keep in mind. And also into the Bay of Campeche, 26 and even 27 degrees Celsius in the southern Bay of Campeche, right by the coast, in March. That is pretty interesting. And there's even 28 degrees on the map right now, and that is in the far southern Bay of Campeche, and this is March. And very, very concerning to see this in the very least. And as I said before, it not only has an impact on hurricane season, but also on severe season as well, because the Gulf of Mexico, with all of its energy that is there, during severe weather season, when we have these huge cold fronts and the battle zone that we usually see during severe season, where we have energy coming from the Gulf of Mexico and also cold air coming from the northern United States, that creates these severe weather seasons. The more the Gulf of Mexico is warm, the more energy that'll be available to tap into these events that could potentially produce, or at least bring higher chances that we have bigger severe weather outbreaks because we have more energy that is available. And that's just something to keep in mind with a Gulf this warm, not only for hurricane season but for severe weather season as well. And also, if you take a look off the southeast coast, also the same situation too, 25 degrees Celsius, still all the way up the Gulf Stream, and still off the southeast coast. That part has not cooled down much as well, and it's still very warm, and that'll too be very interesting, especially as we get closer towards the season. But remember earlier we were talking about how, we're still in this battle zone between between winter and spring. Well, that is very evident, especially when we look at all of these freeze warnings right now across the southeast. Freeze warnings stretching all the way from Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, all the way through the south. There's some sort of freeze warning, and there's even a freeze watch that extends further south than that, all the way down to the coast as well. So really cold conditions right now. Maybe could cool things off in the northern Gulf for a little bit. You know how that could be, with the colder temperatures. Sometimes the shelf waters are a little easier to mix, but still, we've been warm throughout the entire winter. I would imagine that most of the energy that's in the Gulf of Mexico would remain there, basically no matter what at this point, since we're already getting into spring. And basically any time for that, huge Arctic air to kind of come down and completely mix the Gulf of Mexico up, we're basically over with that. So whatever we have right now, we're basically going to be sticking with for the rest of the spring and into the summer here on forward. But still, we still have these periodic events of colder weather, and that's what we have right now. If you have, of course, plants, vegetation that you have, might want to take this into note. And then besides that, we have some winter weather advisories in effect across the northern portions of the United States near the Great Lakes. Winter storm watch in effect for the Sierra and the inner mountains of California. And then besides that, when we look at severe weather, nothing much going on today, nor organized severe weather forecasts for today and for tomorrow as well. This is tomorrow, the day 2 outlook, day 3. Nothing much going on as well. And then we go towards day 4 and 8. Day 4 we have not much going on, as well as day 5. Day 6 though, there could be something. As always, it is March, so always the potential for severe weather there, no matter what. Day 7 though and day 8, the predictability is too low. I mean, it is far out. We're looking at days 7 and 8, so can't really have too much certainty as to what's going on when we do get to that point. But maybe if we do get to that point, and when we're there, we'll probably have some sort of severe weather going on. It is March anyway, and so severe weather season is here, and it is really interesting to see how all this progresses, and to see how all this, ties in with not only with the Gulf of Mexico being warm, not only for severe weather season, but also for hurricane season as well. All interested to see how these things are interconnected, and have impacts not only just outside of hurricane season, but also for severe weather season as well. And of course, it is something that we'll be watching very closely over the next few weeks, as well as the other things for hurricane season. But I guess that is it for now. Don't really have that much to talk about, as still only the off season. But of course, as I do say, these next few weeks will get interesting. That means that very, very, very certain, at least in my point of view, that over the next 2 weeks we will start to have a lot more to talk about when it comes to hurricane season. And with severe weather season almost basically here too, severe weather will also uptick, and that could give us something else to talk about as well in these next few weeks, although we don't have anything from now. So I guess enjoy it while the quiet weather is here. But with that being said, enjoy your rest of your weekend. Have a safe week as well. If you like what you saw today, I very much encourage you to subscribe, like, of course, help us grow our community here on YouTube. That is especially important when it comes to weather tracking community, and that's something that I really do strive for. So hope we could do that. Other than that, have a great week. Take care, and we'll see you back next Saturday.